Reaction. I'm here with Jake Evans. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. Tysheem Johnson showed out. Matt Corral had a solid game. Braylon Sanders had a solid game. You can't really go into offense and defense and all this 11 on 11 stuff, but individual players that stood out. What do you got, Jake?
Well, obviously, I think the primary candidate you got to go for is Matt Corral. I mean, I think throughout the whole spring, everybody has, been kind of just wondering what it's going to look like for him. He was kind of a Heisman candidate for a minute there last year. Obviously had a couple, the LSU and Arkansas game knocked him out of that contention. But, everybody's been wondering all spring what it's going to be like. He's been working without his main weapons. Braylon Sanders, Jonathan Mingo, Dontario Drummond haven't been all the way in spring practice for various different reasons. But they were all back today. And so he got to work with a little bit more of his complete offense, more of what we're going to actually see him use this fall. So yeah, it was great to see him today. I believe he threw 2 touchdowns, 12 of 19, if I remember the stat line correctly. He looked good. He made good decisions with the ball. I think he overthrew a couple of deep balls there, but it was a sloppy day. Most of the time that he was playing, it was still actively raining. And so, some of those plays you just kind of expect with a consistent downpour. But yeah, he was the standout guy for me. Like you said, Tysheem Johnson had a great game too. But I'm the most fired up to see Matt Corral there because, he's the key for this year.
Yes, he's absolutely the key. And if something goes wrong, there's going to be a serious drop-off to the next level, which would be any other team that's going on. If you lose the starting quarterback, there's going to be a drop-off. But it is precipitous with this group. Luke Altmaier had a touchdown there at the end. I think they kind of did that to build his confidence a little bit. But they were able to get on the board. And MJ Daniels with an interception to go with Tysheem's interception as well.
Yeah. Like you said, Tysheem played well. MJ, it was good to see him there. Honestly, that was kind of a name that slipped my mind before the game. Because you don't hear too much out of these spring practices. Kiffin likes to keep it kind of tight-lipped, and that's just kind of the nature of spring practice anyway. But it was great to see him out there. He looked really good. Looked really fluid and looked like he wasn't having trouble adjusting to the speed of an SEC game. Obviously, this isn't an SEC game, but just kind of getting up to par with the talent that he's going to be playing against this year, hopefully. It was good to see. The defense has been pretty solid throughout the whole spring. I believe, if I remember correctly, they'd only allowed 2 touchdowns through the previous couple of scrimmages. So the defenses look good. It was great to see Matt Corral, like we said, obviously get most of his weapons back today, so that we could get more of a complete picture of the puzzle that we're going to be working with this year. Overall, you take a spring game with a grain of salt, but you got to feel pretty good as an Ole Miss fan after today.
Yeah, and Lane Kiffin with a little bit of a master stroke, basically taking a whole position group out of the spring game and basically making the film void and null. It seems like with them being down Henry Parrish and Jerry Neely to start with, it just seemed like a nice thing just to cut out that group, and all of a sudden none of the film means anything because there's no running back room on there.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I mean, with Jerry Neely, obviously, coming off surgery and being with baseball at the moment, we're not going to see any of him throughout the spring, and obviously, like you said, it's just instead of seeing little tiny pieces of the puzzle and seeing an incomplete picture, you might as well just not see the picture at all. I mean, they know what they've got there in that room. The guys that are there, they've seen them. They know what they can do, and throughout these practices, they've been able to see more guys like Kentrell Bullock come along. And so, instead of giving anybody else a look at that, you might as well just keep that one close to your chest. I mean, Matt Corral is an open secret. A lot of the other weapons that are on this team I'm sorry, not an open secret. It's just common knowledge. But so instead of kind of broadcasting that to the world of what you might be looking for with these running backs, keep that one close to the chest. Honestly, I like the play.
Yeah, and spring game's over. Some players made some jumps. It seems like it was a little bit of struggle out there hands-wise for Dennis Jackson. Maybe he's putting a little bit too much pressure on himself because all of the videos coming out of spring practice was him making DeMarcus Lodge-type catches. And I'm curious to see him progress in the fall and see if he can just play a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. He was a high recruit coming out of high school. Was a guy that Ole Miss expected a lot out of, still does. If I remember correctly, he's only got 7 catches through his first 2 years, and I believe all 7 were last year. So, it's really a guy that hasn't performed too well yet. But at the same time, the Rebels haven't really needed him. I mean, obviously, the Rebels had a record-setting offense last year, pretty much through the hands of Elijah Moore and Kenny Yeboah exclusively. So, with pieces like that gone, they need more guys like Dennis Jackson to step up. Obviously, like we said, Braylon Sanders, Jonathan Mingo, Dontario Drummond, those are the guys that you're expecting the ball to go through more this year. But Dennis Jackson's a fantastic athlete. He's got a lot of upside, and like you said, I think part of it is, maybe just kind of he's in his own head. He knows he hasn't performed and lived up to expectations yet. So, maybe part of it's just in his head. But, I expect him to step up better this year. He knows that it's kind of a make or break situation. And this is where, his first big opportunity is coming. So, I'd expect him to step up. I don't think that, like I said, you take today with a grain of salt. It was wet, especially for a receiver. It's tough out there in those conditions today, just with a steady downpour. So, like I said, you take it with a grain of salt, and you kind of move forward, and you just try and stay optimistic.
All right, let's look a little bit forward. We've seen the Grove Bowl. We've seen the individual pieces of each side of the ball and where they fit in a little bit. What do you see from the transfer portal moving forward before fall camp?
That's one of those things that it's obviously you expect the Rebels to have some activity in the transfer portal. I think we would need to defer to our Rebel Walk recruiting lady, Leanne Herring. She would probably have a more specific answer there. If it was me though, I would expect the Rebels to try and add maybe a little bit of depth on the offensive line. I don't know any specific names. I'm not going to try and act like I do at the moment, but I would expect that to be the place where they'd look for to add some depth. Maybe a receiver if they could get it. They already got a Jacour Pearson out of, I believe, Western Kentucky this year in the portal. So there's been some activity there, and Lane Kiffin said that he's left some room for there to be more activity. So there's definitely probably going to be some movement there over the next couple of months. But when you look at the defense, everybody thinks that that's where they need the most help. When it comes down to it, the Rebels are returning 10 of 11 starters on this defense. Granted, it wasn't a great defense, but the thing is, there's a lot of talent over there, and they added a ton more talent, with this recruiting class this year. And so, I really, at this point, I don't know how many more bodies they can add on the defensive side of the ball without it just being an overcrowded situation. So, if I were to say anything, I would think the Rebels would probably look for an offensive line, transfer, because that's, you can never have enough offensive linemen, and that's the foundation of all of it. And with this offense, you got to build, from that offensive line back.
Yeah, and from where I sit, I'm looking tight end, offensive lineman, and maybe a rush in. Not necessarily a buck like Demon Clowney or Sam Williams, but the end that goes on the other side. The more the Marcus Tillman role.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely a spot that you can always use more pass rushers too. And the Rebels are fortunate that they're returning all 4 of their linebackers from last year. But obviously that doesn't mean you need to stop there. So that's definitely a spot they could look for too. And then that totally slipped my mind. The Rebels could use a little bit of help at the tight end spot right now. Obviously they bring in Hudson Wolf, who's a good 4-star prospect. Really highly ranked in this last recruiting cycle. But you got Casey Kelly coming off of an ACL tear, and then after that it's a lot of uncertainty. There's some young guys with a lot of upside that certainly look the part, but it's come down to whether or not those guys can actually play tight end at an SEC level. So yeah, that's definitely a spot they could probably also look for also, because that's a spot that Lane Kiffin likes to use, and the Rebels were blessed last year to have a good tight end with Kenny Yeboah, and with him gone this year, you would prefer to not take a step back. You would prefer to, reload and keep moving.
All right. That was our Grove Bowl instant reaction. The blue team defeated the red team 28-6. For Jake Evans, I'm Steve Willis, and want everybody, have a good